Usopp is the bravest pirate in the entire One Piece universe and the only Straw Hat to have already achieved his dream. Yes, even braver than Luffy and Zoro, probably even combined. And I'm gonna tell you exactly why within the next 14 maybe minutes. For starters, what even is bravery? Well, the Oxford definition from Google is courageous behavior or character. Okay, so what's courage? Aside from the cowardly dog. Again, Oxford Google definition is the ability to do something that frightens one and or strength in the face of pain or grief. And which character does that definition fit to an absolute T other than the GOAT god Usopp? You see, unlike Luffy and Zoro, who are fearless and strong, Usopp is a coward. Usopp is weak, and even then, he fights. He shows strength in the face of fear. He is the very definition of bravery. In all his time on the Straw Hats, he has only once thought about leaving the Straw Hats, which we'll talk about later, but even with their bounties rising, Usopp has always decided to push forward. Because like I said in the beginning, he isn't just the bravest pirate on the Straw Hats, he's the bravest pirate in the entirety of the One Piece world. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning so we can understand the moments that make Usopp so brave and how he's already achieved his dreams. And if you wait till the end, I'll tell you what I think his true dream really is, and the second bravest character in One Piece. So, Usopp's journey begins in Syrup Village. He's introduced as a storyteller and a liar, almost like a boy who cried wolf type character, ironically telling false tales of his own bravado. But even though he is introduced as a liar, he's also introduced as a leader, Captain Usopp, with a brigade of 3 children under his belt that not only just believe in him as a person, can be inspired to take on scary tasks under his command. When the Straw Hats first land on Syrup Village, Usopp and his team head over there to face off with them. Even though they are very silly and all over the place, Usopp puts himself in front of danger in spite of his fears and general weakness. He attempts to stop the pirates at the front lines as if he's capable of protecting the entire island. I think bravery and courage can be infectious, which is why the kids are so down to follow him in a face-off against the pirates, and why Kaya laughs so much at his stories, combating her own illness through Usopp's stories and, dare I say, courage to lie. He tells these stories regardless of how he is ridiculed or perceived by the rest of the village. It creates an ideal for him to live up to, a high standard of a goal that he creates for himself to achieve. And when reality strikes and Captain Kuro puts Kaya and the village in real danger, he steps up with the Straw Hats to face the threat head on. In episode 10, he actually is the first person to punch Captain Kuro because he's insulting his father, Usopp. He stands up to defend the honor of another and does it with so much confidence you can even see Luffy quietly take note in this scene right here. After it is revealed to Usopp and Luffy that the butler is actually Captain Kuro, Usopp runs to the village and tries to save them by warning everybody. But because he's always been crying wolf, nobody believes him. He then runs to Kaya trying to warn her, but even she is left not believing it. And even though everyone doesn't have any faith in him at this point, he still persists. Even with a gun in his face, he kidnaps Kaya from the mansion to get her away from the danger and attacks all of the security with his slingshot, resulting in Kaya slapping him and calling him pathetic. His brave actions worked against him because nobody believes in him. Nobody but the Straw Hats and the kids in his crew. But Usopp, being the brave pirate he is, lies to the kids and tells them he's making the whole thing up so they don't have to get involved in such a dangerous situation. Through and through, regardless of others' perception of him, Usopp always takes the bravest course of action, deciding at the end of episode 11 that instead of convincing everybody, a real liar like him should stop the pirates himself before they get too far so that nobody even notices. So his real warning can become another one of his false warnings, and everybody else gets to continue living in peace, because as he says while he cries his eyes out, he just wants to protect everyone, which inspires the crap out of the Straw Hats. Even Zoro grips his sword, being moved by Usopp, and the team decides to fight with him. After the Straw Hats decide to join him, you can see Usopp's legs are shaking, and he says something very simple but kind of profound. What's wrong with being scared? I think this is the first moment you get to see his bravery in full action. He is absolutely terrified, but that does not stop him from wanting to and attempting to do the thing that scares him. And what was the definition of courage again? The ability to do something that frightens one. After this, the Straw Hats with Usopp by their side fight and win against the Kuro pirates, showing that Usopp's courage is not just in his stories but also in his willingness to confront danger. Our beloved Usopp finally joins the Straw Hats and his tales of grandeur begin. From here on out, Usopp fights alongside his crew in some of the most ridiculous scenarios known to anime fans, always striving for his dream of being brave, and I love how much foreshadowing Oda has set up for Usopp's dream. Only a few arcs later, we end up on Little Garden, where we see giants for the first time, Dory and Brogy, who have been on the island fighting for a century. When Usopp talks to Brogy, it sets up his dream and story from an episode that came out in 2001 to story points that are probably going to come out in 2025. Usopp tells Brogy that he sees giants as the peak of bravery and wants wants to be an Elbaf warrior himself. All this setting up the Straw Hats' journey to Elbaf in the coming months, when Usopp will finally make it to Elbaf and have spent a long part of his journey being a really brave pirate. It's been about 23 years in our time, and with every new arc, Usopp has never faltered. His bravery has only gotten more and more renowned, even if he hasn't yet realized how brave he truly is. The world sees him as a threat as his bounty continues to rise, and it's funny, every time the Straw Hats receive their bounty, Usopp is upset that he continues to go higher, as it frightens him, but never once does he jump ship or leave the crew out of fear. Actually, he does leave the crew one time, but we could argue that it was one of his bravest acts to date. In Water 7, the Going Merry is dying, having just fallen out of the literal sky. The crew is at a standstill in their journey. They can't continue unless their ship is repaired. Luckily on Skypiea, they came into quite a bit of gold, so they go to the most renowned shipyard in Water 7 to meet with their talented shipwrights about the ship. But this leads to terrible news. Merry is supposedly beyond repair and can't be fixed no matter what. During all this, Usopp is attempting to recover the money stolen by the Frankie family. He feels responsible and humiliated, so he confronts the family alone. The Frankie family severely beat Usopp to a pulp, requiring the rest of his crew to rescue Usopp and recover the money. At this point, Luffy has decided to let go of the Merry and get a new ship built. And hearing this idea, Usopp gets viscerally angry. He feels that abandoning the Merry is the same as abandoning a crew member. Luffy and Usopp get into a huge fight, and Usopp decides to leave the crew, not only because of the Merry, but because he also feels like a weak member of the crew that could possibly be just as expendable one day. Now, this is a pivotal moment in the show because it's the first and only time somebody has left the crew of their own volition. On Whole Cake, when Sanji left, there were other reasons at play, but here, Usopp stands up to Luffy, the captain of his ship, and decides to stand on business. In the midst of leaving, Usopp challenges Luffy to a duel to save the Going Merry. Now think about the craziness behind this for a second. Usopp was afraid of being a weak member of the crew, but he decides to challenge the strongest in a duel? Courage had two definitions, I think. What was the other one again? Strength in the face of pain or grief. Usopp, just like on Syrup Village, has a mountain of courage, regardless of his grief or his fear. He will always push for what he thinks is right. He will always defend and protect. And this leads to, in my opinion, probably one of, if not the best fight in the entire show. Usopp versus Luffy. This fight is so good. Not only are the tensions and emotions high, but it's a moment where Usopp shines so bright it's hard not to see the strength of his character. He starts the duel by telling Luffy that unlike his previous enemies, he knows Luffy very well. Usopp fakes coughing blood. This makes Luffy concerned. Usopp mocks and attacks back by blinding him. Then he attacks Luffy with eggs. Usopp shoots Tabasco sauce in Luffy's mouth, then shoots a cloud of ground pepper. He fires explosions at Luffy and gets a ridiculous upper hand. Usopp actually does so good in this battle, it almost feels like he's gonna win in the beginning, but at the end, of course, Luffy knocks him out and wins the duel. This is a great battle. Aside from all the emotion behind it, it really shows how brave and strong Usopp is on top of what he already was. All this leads to Usopp leaving the Straw Hats for a few arcs, and the introduction of a character that with more time could probably even compete with Usopp as a #1 for most bravest pirate, but I think it's probably safer to say that he's the second bravest pirate in all of One Piece. Sogeking. Now, Sogeking doesn't get as much screen time as Usopp. That's why I can't say he's the most brave, but man, is this guy courageous as hell. In the absence of Usopp, Sogeking swoops in and supports the Straw Hats like it's his birthright. I mean, he literally shoots the shot that declares war on the world government. I don't know what you guys think, but that's pretty brave to me. And ironically, as the villain for Usopp, he shares some of Usopp's traits. You can tell there's some fear behind the mask, but he still pursues with courage. Sogeking as a character is almost a testament to Usopp's whole persona, a brave warrior that thwarted his insecurities and is able to help out his crew. Now sadly, we don't see Sogeking much after this, but his impact is forever important. And once Sogeking leaves and Usopp rejoins the crew, he only gets bigger and badder from there. In Thriller Bark, he faces off against Perona and completely annihilates her. The reason he wins this fight? Because he is negative. But the true reason he wins this fight is because he's someone who becomes capable of using his weakness as a strength consistently. And his idea of his own weakness is actually Perona's biggest weakness, and in that battle, his biggest strength. So again, we see him stave off his fears and fight against a formidable foe. In Dressrosa, Usopp attempts to literally flee the battlefield. His fears encapsulate him so deeply, but what does our brave character do? He fights his fear, overcomes them, and eventually musters the courage to face off against Sugar and Treble, leading to an insane snipe from an insane distance. And I love this moment because being the sniper, his character gets to turn his weakness of fear into a strength. He can fight from a distance. but he can still fight. And in this moment, Usopp transcends his very own humanity and becomes the iconic God Usopp. And this scene is absolutely hilarious due to how much Usopp is scared and complains, but it's also a testament to his growth. He still doesn't see it, but there's an army of people that look up to him as their savior because he actually is. And this is the beauty of Usopp, contrasting with traditionally brave characters like Luffy and Zoro, or even outside of One Piece, characters like Goku or Levi or Tanjiro. Traditionally, we look at brave characters to have this unbridled courage and strength, almost based in fearlessness, but I think that's wrong. I don't think Luffy or Goku or Zoro or Levi are necessarily courageous characters. I think they are strong. I think they are determined. I think they're fearless characters. But I think Usopp is the bravest, most courageous character of them all. Which brings me to what I think his true dream is. His true dream isn't to be a brave pirate. His true dream is something that he's not even aware of. It's to be able to admit to himself that he already is a brave pirate. You see, sometimes in life you'll experience imposter syndrome, and those feelings can really convince you to think negatively about yourself, when the truth is, you're not an imposter. You were always supposed to be there. You just have to learn to be able to see yourself as great, because you already are. Usopp has been the bravest warrior the seas of One Piece have ever seen, and by the end of the story, I believe he'll be able to admit that to himself and truly fulfill his dream. He'll finally be able to see in himself what everyone in his life already has. What Kaya saw when he told his stories and ran around lying. What Luffy saw when he recruited him. What every Straw Hat has seen who's a part of the crew. What the Giants have always saw within him. Why he was called God Usopp on Dressrosa. Why the world government keeps raising his bounty. The truth has been there, ready for him to take the entire story. Usopp is a genuinely relatable character because he's just somebody with imposter syndrome. And I think he's a character that's written so perfectly. He was introduced as a liar and a storyteller. And the biggest lie he ever told was to himself. The biggest lie he has ever told is that he himself is not brave. Thanks for watching. If you like the content and want to stay tapped in on all things anime and awesome, please subscribe.